So guys, I'm not doing many videos anymore these days, and I think that's mainly because I feel that every story that comes out is just covered to death. Every YouTube channel, every news media outlet has to jump on every story to generate clicks, basically get a piece of the click pie, generate money. And most of the time I just feel like my 2 cents, if I throw them in there, it doesn't make a difference, it's not necessary. However, every now and then you come across a story where you're like, hold on, this deserves more attention than it gets really. And I feel this is such a story. So if you click the video, you're probably familiar with Colin Moriarty, previously IGN and Kinda Funny host, actually also Kinda Funny co-founder. He then nearly left the world of video games behind, moved on to do his own thing called Colin's Last Stand, and for more than 2 years already he's doing that very successful. It's more a political approach to things. He talks about history-based content and so on. It's rather interesting. I'm not watching it a lot, but it is interesting. He's got a huge following and support on Patreon. However, he also is part of a PlayStation podcast. That podcast is called Sacred Symbols, which, if you see the context of this story, might not be the most advantageous name in my personal opinion. However, if you look into it, it is actually in reference to the Sony PlayStation's 4 icons, right? Because he's a massive PlayStation nerd. He already was in the past. And actually, that's where I mainly know him from. You know, Podcast Beyond and the early stuff that he still did with Greg Miller at Kinda Funny. I always enjoyed his input in any debate, right? And I to be honest, like just on a side note, I feel like since he left Kinda Funny, since he's not kind of the partner in crime with Greg Miller, Kinda Funny also lost a lot of its charm. That's just my personal opinion. He really added something really valuable to nearly every debate that I heard. And I because he left, I stopped listening to a lot of the work that Greg Miller does and so on, because I felt it was the dynamic between those two people that really brought it to life and made it interesting. However, now he's doing a new PlayStation podcast together with a guy called Chris Maldonado. I think I just shredded that name, but you get the idea. He's basically a popular YouTube creator, and he's making fun little songs about how terrible social justice warriors are and stuff like that. It's not really my cup of tea, but hey, go ahead, do your thing. However, now to celebrate that podcast with his fans, that Sacred Symbols podcast, Moriarty set up a panel at PAX West, and it was confirmed, it was in the books, they had a location, a time, a date, everything was set. Moriarty communicated to his fans, they've all booked the flights, the hotels, everything was prepared and set in stone, right? They're like, okay, there's gonna be the Sacred Symbols panel at PAX West, and people were really excited. Yeah, I don't listen to the podcast, but I get it. People are excited, they wanna go there. And then this happened. Colin Moriarty broke the news himself on Twitter with a very short tweet, releasing the message that came from PAX. And it looked like this. Apologies. Unfortunately, we have to remove your panel from PAX West 2019. We apologize for any confusion and are happy to still issue special guest badges to you and the folks you had designated as speakers. So you will still have access to the show for all 4 days. Isn't that great? And I mean, it's been set in stone. It had been confirmed. So sure, I mean, unforeseen things can come up, I understand, but the thing I notice is there's no reason. There's no reason in this email. At least you should say, well, this happened, so we had to cancel your show, we're really sorry, yada, yada, yada. But none of this is in there. So Colin replied, respectfully asking for a reason. And I think, that's more than is right. He deserves a reason why this panel has been removed. However, that was the reply that he got 24 hours later. And they're saying, hey, Colin, apologies for the 24-hour delay on the response. We made the difficult decision to pull the Sacred Symbols panel from the PAX West 2019 schedule. We pride ourselves on historically not shuffling or canceling panels last minute, but unfortunately, we had to make this call after you had already verified. And then they keep banging on a little bit. It's less relevant. They talk about refunds and so on. But again, you notice in this message, there's no reason. Why? I mean, in his reply to the first message, Colin specifically asked, why? I mean, give me a reason. Why is this happening? And then at least we know what it's all about. But they don't give a reason, even after they've been specifically asked for it. But what's really interesting is if you go through the replies to Colin's original tweet and also the second one where he released those messages from PAX, there are a lot of tweets that are like, oh, if it is why we all think it is, and then everyone seems to be dancing around saying what they think. Nobody says, oh, that must be because of that reason. There were a few tweets that pointed to straight people and directions, It made a little bit more sense. But overall, everyone's just like, I think I know why it is. But nobody says explicitly what they are assuming is the reason. But if you dig a bit deeper, and I've tweeted myself, I said, like, can someone just say why? Because I really didn't get it. I'm not following Colin that much, so I'm not too familiar with his content. Turns out most people believe that it's just because Colin is very conservative. And I looked at several of his videos, in the beginning, a few years back when he started Colin's Last Stand. Of course, it's exciting. Wanted to know what's going on. And yes, he is a conservative, and he's probably leaning more to the right political spectrum than to the left. However, it has to be said that he's always very considered and informed in his opinions, right? He doesn't propagate hate against races or gays or anything ridiculous like that. He is just a conservative. In fact, when Googling it, right, because I was like, so if it is because he's conservative, it can't just be because he's conservative. It must be because he said some stuff that could be interpreted to be fascist or whatever. So I did like an extensive Google session trying to find out whether he said something that's really offensive. And it has to be said, at this point, I really have to give this disclaimer. I'm personally super left-leaning, right? I'm very liberal and progressive in my opinions and my thinking. I think I have no sympathy with like the hard right or like strong conservative thoughts. But like someone else said in a video about this quite rightly, Colin is a guy that you could sit down with and have a sensible debate. I don't mind conservatives if they allow you to have a debate. Now, I'm not going to agree on everything that he says, and he's not going to agree on everything that I say, but we're going to be able to have a sensible debate about a wide range of topics. So I'm at this point I was confused, right? And I'm like, there's nothing here. I can't find a single thing. And even people who hated him and people who said, that he's going to PAX is the worst thing of all time, even those people didn't supply any clear tweet or message or statement from him where I'd be like, okay, that's even remotely controversial or clearly like close to, I don't know, fascism or anything. I just couldn't find anything. Guys, if you feel I missed something, then please link it down in the comment section, right? Because I literally couldn't find anything. When Colin was asked why he thinks the panel was cancelled, he speculated, and I'm quoting here, "Our panel likely got cut because a small cabal of whiny people complained and got our PlayStation podcast deplatformed," right? So he's speculating into the same direction. Now, it has to be mentioned at this point, I think, that in recent years, PAX West revolves increasingly around left-leaning politics and like the social justice in gaming. So knowing that, banning him or removing his panel for his conservative opinions kind of fits the picture. But again, I just felt there must be more to this, right? And at this point, it's really just speculation, but I didn't feel that PAX West would cancel a panel that abruptly. And it's terrible press for them as well. It doesn't get covered a lot, but a lot of people are talking about it on Twitter and so on. So I dug a bit deeper. And I came to the point where I realized that probably his conservative views are at least part of the reason. They are one aspect of why this panel has been cancelled. But if you think a bit further, I actually think the reason is probably less him personally, but possibly the people he would attract. Colin's opinions are always very sophisticated and well thought out and very well communicated. He's very articulate. So I don't think that would necessarily be the problem, but unfortunately that's not the case with all right-leaning conservatives. And I'm pretty sure because he does represent those opinions, you do attract a lot of people that I'm sure even Colin would not be comfortable with following him. But, you will get those people at PAX, and I feel maybe PAX just didn't want to give those people a platform through him, if that makes sense. But then again, it's a PlayStation podcast, right? So I would say it's pretty much apolitical, and I don't think Colin would have turned this into a political panel. I really think he would have left politics out of this completely, and it would have just been like a PlayStation panel, how we've seen so many. PAX is about video games, so what's going on here? So then I came to another theory, and that's actually rather interesting. In his last reply to PAX, after that second message that we saw, he wrote a rather lengthy email expressing how disappointed he is in PAX's decision, and also he mentioned, nearly in a side sentence, that him and his podcast partner have received threats of violence in case the PAX West panel would happen. So there's a bunch of guys and girls, potentially, sending threats of violence to him and his podcast partner. So I felt that's interesting because I'm pretty sure those same people also threatened PAX West. I'm sure they wrote them email, probably anonymously, saying, if you allow this panel to happen, we'll turn PAX into a political protest, which might become violent or something along those lines. I'm just making it up. Again, this is all just speculation. But I feel if they threatened Colin, they definitely also approached PAX and threatened them to turn it into a political nightmare. Now, as someone who worked in events before, that is a massive liability for any event organizer. You do not want to have an angry mob bringing negative press to your event. So maybe they thought the easy way out is just to cancel the panel. These people won't come. The guys who threatened PAX with political protests just have no reason to protest. And that kind of disarms the situation, so to say. I mean, that doesn't make that decision right, in my opinion. I don't think it's right to deplatform these guys for those reasons we spoke about. But again, as someone who worked in events, I can totally understand that you just want to come up with an easy and quick way to not have an angry mob on site. And that reason also kind of fits the bigger picture because, an argument like we've received threats of violence in case your panel happens, and since we don't want to deal with that bullshit, we're just canceling it. It's just a terrible reason, right? If that's the true reason, you wouldn't say it because you're just stirring up more shit and people are like, oh, what? No, that's the reason. Social justice warriors, leftists, and the whole charade begins again. So it does make sense from PAX's view to just be silent about that reason, if that's the reason. Now, as PAX mentioned in their own message, is that they've never historically canceled panels last minute. This is like an extremely rare occasion, and it's the first time for this to happen. Now, you would think, oh, that's a big story, right? Like PAX deplatforms those guys. Let's put that on every media news. But nobody talks about it. You go to Kotaku, you go to Polygon. Nobody addresses this story at all. I mean, if Colin would be like a hardcore Nazi fascist, who's just like propagating against Jews and gays and any immigrant and, pro-Trump and whatever, sure. You'd be like, okay, I get it. You don't want to give him any reach. You don't want to propagate his stuff, put his name out there. I understand that. But none of this is the case. At least I couldn't find it. I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong, right? If you have messages or quotes from him that are really, really controversial and fascist and anti-human or whatever, then leave that down in the comment section below. I'm happy to look at it, but I couldn't find it. So why is this not covered? Why is nobody talking about this? This is the first time a panel got cancelled, removed after it was confirmed from PAX. That should be a big story. I don't know, guys. What do you think? I mean, do you think it's purely politics? Or is PAX trying to keep the event clean from unwanted incidents like I described, and bad press? What's the story behind this? I'm not sure we're ever going to really find out because it seems like they're not willing to bring any transparency to this matter. But I find it a very, very curious story. And again, I'm very much left-leaning. I'm not like a conservative who tries to support Colin in his political views here. I probably won't agree with many things that he says. But nonetheless, I personally don't see a reason or like a valid reason why this happened as it did. Guys, leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. That would be much appreciated. You can also subscribe to the channel, like I said in the beginning. I'm not doing many videos these days, but when I do one, it's absolutely amazing, like this one. No, I'm joking, but you get the idea. If I do one, then I really feel it's relevant, and I'm really filtering the content to a point where I feel, okay, this is worth talking about. So if you enjoyed that video, consider subscribing. I'd appreciate it. Guys, take care. I appreciate you're watching this video to the end. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you next time. I'm out. Bye.